All right, brother. Well, thank you so much.
How are you, man? This is wonderful.
This is awesome. Thank you for helping me with this.
Of course. Only one response, man, for a brother.
That's awesome. And so what I like to do is to orient the people, the viewers, with who you are. And so can you just sort of tell us about where you're from, how you grew up? Just bring us along that path.
Yeah. 20 blocks that way. From this very office. We grew up in East Denver, Curtis Park, 5 Points. My mom came to this country in 1971. She was as an undocumented, unauthorized immigrant, 6 months pregnant with me. I was born in DG, Denver General. It's not Denver Health. It's Denver General.
Denver General.
It's always Denver General. My father, my biological father, was in Mexico. My mom left him. It was a very abusive, violent relationship. So when she got here, she was by herself. And my father, I hate to make the distinction, right? But it's my adopted father. But he's my only father because he's the one that raised me, so he's the only one. He's the one that gave me my last name, Espinoza. So I'm thankful for. He gave me the experience of having a father. It was hell for my mom. He was violent. She left one violent relationship and found another, probably even more violent. But I had a father, so I grew up in Curtis Park and 5 Points. We lived in many places around there. You know how it is. Just your parents hear about cheaper rent down the block, so you end up moving.
Right.
You don't really move; you just move across the street. Yeah, I'm a desegregation boy from Keys versus Denver School District 1. Went to Curtis Park Community Center for Head Start, Mitchell Elementary, Ebert Elementary, and grew up in the East Side. Yeah, grew up in East Denver.
And you've always been here, except for when you went to school. But yeah, you when we were talking before, you noted how you came down to Metro, right, to look, and you were concerned, like, yo, are they gonna, get me for being on campus, type thing. It was a different thinking back then.
Different thinking for me, yeah. I'd seen a commercial for the Community College of Denver. This was after high school, and I worked for a year in the warehouses and in manual labor, and I didn't want that. It was tough. I didn't know the warehouses were that tough. I didn't know all of that was that difficult. You don't know much at the age of 18. So I saw a commercial for the Community College of Denver on the television, and I'd grown up there my whole life. I spent some time in El Paso for middle school. But I didn't know that there was this university just on the other side of downtown. So I took my bike and I came down through downtown, and it was over there. It was the old Denver auditorium, and I went to the back porch essentially, right? And I sat in the shade and I looked at this campus. Probably looked at it for about an hour, wondering if I could go on to the campus, because I was afraid that if I wasn't a student that they would ask me to leave. So I did that, and then when I got on campus, I was walking my bike through, and I was looking around like I had stole something. Worried that some security guard was going to ask me for my student ID, and if I wasn't, I was going to be escorted off campus. I didn't know. That's how little I knew. How little I knew. I knew I wanted to go to university, and Community College Denver was my first institution.
And when you were in high school and so forth, were you into studying? I mean, where was this feeling of wanting to pursue more education?
I was into reading. I was into reading and thinking. I had counselors one day had come to a class that I was in, and they were asking people who wanted a pass for, to get out of class probably in the next week or so, because the people from Stanford University were coming. And I didn't know much about Stanford except the name. So I wanted to go, but no one asked me. So I harbored that resentment. And, one day we were taking a standardized test, and I finished it rather quickly. It was like 100 questions. And the teacher, an older white woman, she comes up to me and says, you could have at least tried, or something of the sort. Mm-hmm. And I said, I did. And so the next day she came back and she said, you got each and every question correct. I'm so sorry. Mm. And then they put me in AP history, which I stayed for one day because I didn't feel that I belonged there. Mm. But I liked the teacher, and I was very easy at the time to manipulate and trick. Mm. I kept going back to talk with him. His name was Mr. Ravello. I kept going back to talk with him, and he would say things like, well, I'd give you this book to read, but you probably wouldn't read it. Mm. My response was like, give it to me. Yeah. He knew what he was doing. He was playing one game, I was playing tic-tac-toe, and he was doing something more elaborate, right? So, yeah, I think the first book that he gave me was The Winter of Our Discontent by John Steinbeck. And he asked me a question that I remember to this day. Come back after you read it, he says, and tell me the meaning of the talisman. Mm. All right. And he did that. And so I was a reader. Mm. I just didn't, I wasn't comfortable in my own skin. I wasn't comfortable anywhere.
And so you eventually start off. Remind me again. So did you go straight into Metro?
I went to Community College of Denver for a year.
Right.
And then I transferred to Metro, and I excelled at the Community College of Denver. I was a 4.0 student. Right. But I was still getting in trouble at night. Still getting in a lot of trouble. Mm. And then I went to Metro. Again, I alternately thrived there, struggled, did really well, got in trouble, all kinds of things. Mm-hmm. That's where I grew up, essentially. The Auraria campus.
Right. Mm-hmm. And you were talking about you had, you would take classes and you'd be so intrigued by the material. And then when the teachers, professors would try to give you a test, just some sort of multiple choice question test, what did you do?
I would just not show up. Principles.
Principles, yeah.
I remember we were studying the Roman Empire, which I was fascinated by because my father was like, a history buff. He had spent a lot of time in jail, in prison, in southern Colorado State Prison. And, it was one of the things that he was into was the Romans. The books, the movies, the whole thing, Mm-hmm. So I loved it. And then we had a 100-question true-false, which I thought was ludicrous. So out of protest, I would not show up and not take it. I said, I'll take the F. I'll take the learning, but I'll take the F.
Right.
And I did that way too many times.
Yeah, for multiple classes, right?
Hey, man, an F will mess up your GPA hard. It'll mess up your GPA hard more than an A will help it.
Right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's true.
Yeah, it's a deep hole, man. It's a deep, deep hole.
But again, there was this feeling of, I won't do this. I won't participate in this sort of like, what would you call that? Devaluing of knowledge? I mean, what?
Sure. I think it was. I was an overly serious young man, and I'm still a somewhat overly serious older man. But I can't deny that there was some youthful sort of, attraction to leading a principled life, because it's not the way that we grew up. Mm. We saw that everything was possible. Like, everything was possible as long as you could enforce it, You could say or do whatever you wanted as long as you were more open to using violence, in order to get your way. If you could do that, then you could do whatever you wanted, anything.
Right.
And so I think by the time that I got to college, I was trying to rebuild myself morally.
Okay.
And that was very much hit and miss. Because as a child growing up in that kind of a house, you have to be quiet. You have to watch all of this and not speak out about it.
Right.
And it corrodes you from the inside. So that you may have a moral compass, but it doesn't know true north by the time you reach adolescence, And, by the time I reached adolescence, I was big. I was bigger than my dad.
Right.
So, any young man who grows up in a home like I did knows that they also get to that point where, what are you going to do? Mm-hmm. I'm telling you to stop. Won't you come? Won't you try then? Won't you step? Mm-hmm. It's a terrible moment of reckoning, right? With you and one's father, but it comes. It comes. And that's like the first grasp of like trying to rebuild some sense of morality, but it's a shaky foundation.
Yeah. Your mom, I remember you were talking about when you were in school, like to get books and things, your mom was making sure you had your books. She'd work extra shifts. She knew how to, did you sort of talk about that? I don't want to make sure to do it justice.
This is during undergraduate time, and I would point out, that there's, I remember one book in particular was a book of photography, a new book about Ciudad Juarez on the U.S.-Mexico border, and I wanted it. It was quite pricey, a tattered cover. So my mom, because you could do things like all these buildings, my mom cleaned them. Mm-hmm. And I worked in it and I was fired many times because I got, I'm the child of an immigrant. Right. So I got mouthier. I grew up with, the sense that I'm an American citizen. So, right. I got a mouth on me, right? So, let's say for example, she wanted to make some extra money. She could clean the 18th floor, for which they would pay her, like 1.5 hours. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter how long it takes you. It's a big floor, right? If it takes you 3 hours, you only get 1.5 hour pay. But if you do it in 45 minutes, you can double up on other things, right? So you can make, sometimes in a 6-hour night, 8 hours of pay. And that's how she would do it. Give me the money for the book. And I purchased the book, and I'm eternally grateful for that, my mother always procured for me the materials that I wanted and needed, always.
That's what's up.
There were some things that she didn't know how to do by virtue of her own upbringing, but, making sure that her children always had, that was one of them. She knew how to do that.
Right.
Yeah.
And so you go through Metro, and with some protest of classes.
Transcript. Pockmarked with F's. Out of principle. Huh?
Out of principle, though. Out of principle. And so then you were going to start to do your master's. Mm-hmm. But then you were just like, what?
I did 1 year of master's work at CU Denver.
Right.
But that was the same year that I was applying to UCLA. It was the second time I had applied to UCLA. The first time I didn't get into the program, to the Department of History. Uh-huh. The second I applied in education. And that's when I got in. But then by the time I got in, there was no need to, I got an acceptance letter to UCLA. I'm not going to finish at UCD.
Right.
I'm going to go. I'm not going to finish at UCD Poli-Sci. I'm going to go. Mm-hmm. So I left.
And got out there. Mm-hmm. And how was that experience?
I thrived. Mm-hmm. It's what I was waiting for. It was what I was waiting for. I didn't belong. I didn't have pedigree.
Right. You said there are people from Stanford, from Harvard there in the PhD program.
Yeah, and my cohort, which was 10, 10 group of 10, Stanford, Berkeley, those kind of places.
Harvard.
Yeah. And here I am, Metro State, 2.0 GPA. But a reader and a writer.
Right.
And that's what got me. Mm-hmm. That I had people who believed, professors who believed in me.
Yeah.
in me, probably more than I believed in myself, probably more, which would fit the script.
Right. Because when you got there, I mean, you were excelling. Your ability to, what do you call that? Debate, conversate.
At first, it was less than that. At first, it was more the ability to duel and to embarrass people because they had pedigree and I didn't. And I had an enormous chip on my shoulder. So it wasn't that productive in some ways. It wasn't. I wanted to show that I belonged when I already belonged because I had the letter of acceptance, right?
Right.
And I did those kinds of things. I battled. I went with the express purpose of doing that. It's not the most productive thing, and you build a reputation for yourself as someone who's sharp, but also someone who's, somewhat combative.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was in your second year that your, in a sense, mentor spoke to you in a really kind and way that you could receive it, right?
Yeah. She had a way. She said, don't you want people? I had just finished doing that to somebody else, running circles around them and making them look bad in front of other people. She said, but don't you want people to listen to you? And it hit me. It's like, I do. I desperately want them to listen to me. And I was going about it entirely the wrong way. It stuck with me all these years. It stuck with me then. And I had to change it up. I had to change it up. And I had to become something better.
That's it. And you did 6 years there, completed your PhD.
6 years there, yeah.
And then came back home.
Came back home.
Yeah.
Came back home. To the Auraria campus,
right.
Where I started. Where I used to clean and where I used to set up events at the Auraria Event Center. Stay all night, setting up the stands, mopping, sweeping, the whole thing.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty cool, man.
And I mean,
it's
you've
quite
had
wonderful.
Such an effect on people because you have the that program that you set up with students, and now I mean a lot of them have graduated, but they still come back and work on the program. Will you talk about that a little bit?
Yes, the Right to Learn Undergraduate Research Collective started in 2006, but we didn't really have a name probably for the first 4 years. It was just, it was a young woman who was one of my migrant students who had approached me about this problem of at the time, right, that there was no statutory provision for undocumented or unauthorized immigrants to attend, higher, to seek higher education, university education, other than, at an exorbitant rate, and, she was troubled by this. I was troubled by it. I couldn't do much. I didn't think, She was troubled by it, and she would just keep coming to the office and say, what are we going to do? And we would just read and talk and read and talk and read and talk. I didn't know exactly what it is that we were doing. We were studying. We're trying to formulate a question, trying to figure out how to do something about this, how to make sure that education could be recognized as a universal human entitlement, irrespective of one's social status, right, or immigration status. That's how we started. Now we're in our 12th year, 4 generations of undergraduates. We got people who were once in, who when they started in the group, of course, they were undergraduates, and one now lives in Japan. The other, another one is in med school. A couple others are teachers now. But I know some of these young people I was their first professor out of high school.
Right.
I was their mentor throughout, helped them get their jobs. So I played a role in their lives, they in mine. We all recognize each other as family. And that's no exaggeration. That's my engrafted kin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what's up. Speaking of that, what would you say is your main purpose to accomplish on this planet, at least currently?
I'm a dignity scholar,
Mm.
and I'm trying to figure out ways to cultivate, human rights cultures here on this planet. One way we're going to do that is we're going to amend the Colorado Constitution, its education clause, which is anemic at best. We're going to change that. Try to make something lasting. Because I don't want my hands empty at the end of life. I would like for them to not be empty.
Mm. When did you identify that this was what you were called to do?
I wish it was like Paul, or Saul on the way to, he gets the voice and knocked off the horse, But it was more of a slow evolution, Probably because I'm a slow learner, man. I make mistakes. I try not to make them over and over again, and sometimes I do. But I try not to make them over. I think I'm made of clay, man. So it was a slow build up, but it's clear as a trumpet now. It's clear as a trumpet now, whereas before maybe I heard it and perhaps thought it was a figment of my imagination, but I know I have a destiny. I know this is what it is, what I was placed on the planet to do. This is what I'm doing. I'm doing it with great confidence and also in like a stillness inside.
Respect upon that. Regarding the what you're doing, your professional goals, the way that you're progressing, how would you maybe describe yourself? Are you a creator? Are you like a pioneer, a learner? Like if you had to choose a word.
I'm an East Side boy, a child of desegregation who doesn't really deserve all the goodness that I experience, but I have it. That's the grace of God, so I got it. So I'm gonna try to cherish it. That's about all I got. I don't really merit the opportunities and things that I have, but I'm trying to take care of them and trying to, again, hold them near and be watchful of them.
What beliefs or concepts do you maintain that are allowing you to be effective or successful in what you're doing?
I'm a child of God, I try to be governed in my behavior through the example of Jesus, That's very new in my life, That's very new. I've been working toward that, I think, since I was a child. I'm guided by the best of my father. I'm guided by the best of my mother. There are good people who deserve better opportunities in different circumstances. I learn from my children. I learn from, the woman in my life, the woman I'm about to marry. I'm just trying to do better. I have friends who are, they're my family really more than my family. You can't learn from my family unless you want to learn how to do something ill, man. So I'm taking it where I can get it. I'm being opportunistic about it,
Yeah. How do you ensure that you maintain those beliefs and you keep them? Because, a lot of things could happen to distract you. How do you ensure that you stay the course, maintain those concepts, those beliefs that are keeping you moving forward?
I think I keep, this is something like, from, sort of, old Christian thinking. I keep my sins close. I try not to anymore to continue to punish myself about it because, you just simply can't live like that. It's not very sustainable, But I keep my sins close. I try to keep my mistakes close. I'm not that far from them. I'm really not. I'm really not. So they serve as a reminder for me of, foolish, dumb things I've done in the past that I don't want to repeat. And so I also try not to live under them as much as possible. I think as, I don't try to set them up on high so that they cast a shadow upon me, which would sort of poison my efforts in the here and now.
Right.
And I'm progressively getting better at that. I listen to people who are of faith. I read quite a bit, a ton.
Yes.
A ton. I study myself. Like I said, I'm still somewhat overly serious older man, so I take my life serious. I do. So I think it's just a constant effort. But I have this idea in mind of the kind of person that I want to be, that I aspire to be, and I want to be that. I want to be that.
That's awesome.
I desperately want to be a good man. Desperately.
Are there? We just talked about beliefs and concepts, and this may have some overlap. But are there any particular actions that you do that help you maintain focus or continue to be effective? Like specific actions, or?
I'm a disciplined person. I write and read regularly every day. I pray. This is something very, very private. I pray clumsily. Some people tell me that that's the only way to pray. Like, you can't be formulaic about it. And sometimes I just get on my knees because I feel like I'm on fire inside and I'm lost. And some people say that's the best way to pray. It doesn't feel like it at the time. It doesn't feel like you're doing anything very, sort of intentional and formal, of course, But, that helps me quite a bit because I've gotten in trouble in the past in my life when I haven't been able to be honest with myself and haven't been able to, say to myself that this is not a prudent or wise decision that you're making. And I have to be on the watch for that. I have to be watchful for that. I know where I fall. I know where I've fallen. I know what I'm susceptible to.
Right.
So I have to be vigilant about it.
Yeah. That actually leads into the next question I want to ask, which is, can you sort of identify the difference in how you're thinking and processing things now with how you did, say, however many years ago?
What, just a few years ago? Yeah. A greater capacity to be honest with myself. Again, this is the house that we grew up in. It was beneficial to lie. It was beneficial to lie. That's all anybody did. My mom would lie about how she was okay. They buy. This is like one thing that, my dad was no joke. People was afraid of him. Everybody was afraid of him. Then he would have these moments in which he, recognized. This is like the cycle of an abuser, right? They would recognize what he did, and there'd be this period of roses and reconciliation, right? And so part of that for us was like nobody ever really apologized to us as children that I'm sorry for what we're putting you through. I don't remember that. But they would give us things. And, my father was a drug dealer too, So we never, toys for Christmas, always. Birthday, always. Security, peace, nah. So they compensated by giving us stuff. And one of them was like, one of the things that we got was like, like food. So when my parents would leave the house, I would just, I ate a whole loaf of bread because it was good. And you get home and what is a loaf of bread? I don't know. So it was one of these things they give it to you to placate you, right? And to pacify you. Try to make up for what they they was putting you through.
Right.
But then if you consume it in a way that wasn't acceptable, you catch hell for that. It was better to lie. It was better to lie. So I think I went through my adolescence and my early 20s and I think up until recently too, where it was always present like this. Why not just lie about it? Things you didn't have to lie about, And it's not that I was good at it either, because I'm also like really like super sensitive, which is a bad thing, man. Like you're gonna be a liar and you want to be super sensitive too.
It's not a mix.
It's not a mix. It doesn't go well, So, yeah, I think that was the thing that I sort of had to be on the lookout for, man.
Is there something that maybe like an advice or some type of advice that you would have told the younger you, or would have liked to have told the younger you?
Don't lie about it. Don't lie about the fact that it hurts. There's incredible pain with everything. You keep it inside, man. You think you work on it yourself. It's working on you. It works on you. It's corrosive.
Yeah.
It's corrosive, and that's what you become. You have this. There comes to be a great distance between the you that you envision and that you want to be, or that you hold yourself to be, and the one that actually is. Like an entire gulf. And you can't. Those two can't coexist without getting you in trouble. Without having you fall into peril.
It's real. Looking at where you are now and just the process, did you believe that you were going to be successful? Did you have that feeling that I'm going to succeed in this?
I think it was. I was at cross purposes with myself, because I sometimes I would not believe, but what would I be doing? Like at the Auraria campus on the last day before Christmas break, right? I'd be up there in the southwest corner of the library with a stack of books, reading until they threw me out. So I had like this combination of incredibly low self-esteem, a sense that I wasn't of value. And at the same time, I was doing all these things that showed that I believed in myself more than anybody. Somehow they had to be reconciled. One was going to win out more than the other over the long term.
Right.
I'm fortunate that the self that knew what I was worth ended up over the course of my life, winning that battle. I'm very fortunate.
That's what's up. Yeah. So now, do you sort of feel confident as you move forward that you will meet success?
Yeah, most definitely. Yeah, confident to I talk to my man. Confident to that point. Yeah, I have like a supreme confidence in what it is that I'm able to do. About the work itself, you have to be more, sort of low key about it, because that you're in for something that takes 10, 20, 30 years.
Okay.
But in just of like what it is that I know that I'm capable of and what I can do, I have a history of accomplishment that there's not any problem on the page that I can't solve. In terms of writing and composition. And I know that the bigger one, that will allow us to write these things regarding dignity, regarding education as a fundamental right of personhood. I know what it is that I have a strong idea about what it is that we have to change in society so that those words can have a different kind of meaning. And I know that's the long term. And then there's this other one where this is what I do for a living. I fill up that page with things, and that's how I pay my rent. That's how I take care of my family. That's how I do everything. That's what I make. I make something appear out of nothing. So I know I can do that. But it's the other stuff that's that takes collective effort.
Yeah.
It's nice to be part of something. It really is nice to be part of a tradition. That's why I think this idea about destiny, I ain't playing. Mm-hmm. I'm a desegregation boy, and look at the things that I do. Look at the things that I work on. That seems to me just, poetically, just beautiful, that was me as a child. And now this is me as an adult working on these things, carrying it forward in the best way that I can.
Right. Mm-hmm. Tell us your view of money.
I can't make it fast enough, man. I can't make it fast enough. I just put it where it's supposed to be, I guess. I put it where it's supposed to be. It solves certain problems in the world. You flip the switch and the lights will come on. My daughter, she wanted to go to a very expensive, art college in Oakland, California College of the Arts. Hey man, that wasn't some university on the corner. Man, that was like, it's pricey. Money. It's pricey. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I just put it there. I don't put much value in owning a lot of things. Mm-hmm. I just like to put it where it can, where it can help open up opportunities for the people that I love. I'm a provider, man. Right. It's like, that's how we're socialized as men. At least you can, I think at least I've always done that. I've always been able to do that, I think, to the best of my ability. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, it's just utilitarian, put it where it's supposed to be.
Sort of looking at where you are now, would you attribute that to more so focused effort or luck? A mix? What? How would you?
I think a mix of everything. I've made better decisions, right, progressively over the course of my life, more and more and more and more, and those things add up and they make you into something, right? Because you don't just, you don't choose to study once. You choose to study every time you want to give up and you think that I don't want to read another page, and you have to read another 100.
Right.
You have to make that decision over and over and over again. Same thing with if you want to be a good husband, you have to make that over and over and over again. And I didn't always do that. You want to be a good father, you got to do over and over and over again.
Were there ever people who tried to dissuade you from pursuing something? And if so, how did you deal with that?
Maybe dissuade is too strong a term, but certainly people didn't understand what it is that I was doing and going to college. I think people in my own family, even sometimes my own mother, because I said, at Metro State, it was, I got into trouble, got into legal trouble for my activities off of campus. So, it took me longer to get my BA, and I think family members would say, why don't you just work? And they would not see the study as work, which was a source of great tension in my family, like it still is with me, like it's a big thing when people say to me that, that what we do, the studying, the reading, the writing isn't work, it's like, if there's one thing that'll get on my bad side, I think these days I'm very much a person who's slow to anger.
Okay.
But that one will light me up.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That'll light me up. So, not understanding what it is that I was trying to do with my life, I think, maybe that's a form of, maybe that's kind of about as strong as it got. Sometimes you don't feel all the way the support. Sometimes you don't.
Yeah.
But even for me, I worked against myself.
Okay.
But I would still be there. Semester after semester after semester.
Mm-hmm. How much attention do you give to people who maybe aren't supporting you actively, like to their statements, their actions?
Not much.
Mm-hmm.
I dispatch of it pretty quickly. If they catch me on the wrong day, I'll say something to them right there. Most of the time, I'll just move on.
Mm-hmm.
But if they catch me on the wrong day or they say the wrong thing, again, I'm slow to anger, but I'll bring it up.
Mm-hmm.
I'll bring it up. But not much, man.
That's awesome. From what you've seen, your experiences, what are some things that maybe prevent people or hinder people from going out and doing things that maybe are on their heart to do.
Yeah. Tradition, resources, circumstances, all of that produces some kind of working sense of belief, right? And it's more or less robust, or it's more or less, you work against yourself, you sabotage and undermine yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes there are certain things that you're good in, others that you actively say, I can't do this. So it's, before you even get the balloon off the ground, you're already, you've already sort of, sentenced yourself to, to failure and inaction, those kinds of things. Certainly economic circumstances, right? That works against you. And you have to summon up more courage, to say if you have to take out a student loan or you have to take out a loan of any kind, you have to summon up the courage to do that. But that can also be trumped by incredible self-belief, coupled to, having a real look at what it is you're trying to do and the circumstances surrounding it. Because there ain't no way, I can believe in myself all I want, Colin, but there ain't no way that if I make myself eligible for the NBA draft, that ain't gonna happen.
Mm-hmm.
I'll go out and buy me some LeBrons or whatever. that's not gonna take place. Circumstances don't afford that.
Right. Mm-hmm. Do you intentionally engage in activities? I mean, I know you do, but for the benefit of the viewers, do you intentionally engage in activities that help you become better? Like going to meetings or think tanks or ARAs, stuff like that.
I wouldn't, yes.
Even not on that high of a level, just even if it's things that you're doing.
Yes, I do. And I wouldn't consider those things, like for me, like going to those academic conferences, they're far from primary. For me, it's, I'll spend time by myself, reading scripture, or I'll go worship, or I'll serve my daughters, or I'll serve the youth that I'm working with. Those are the things that matter to me. But I think my entire life, everything is centered around me trying to become a better person. Become the man that I always wanted to be, the man that I envisioned myself, to be, that I'm capable of being.
Right. I
think all of it is like that. It's all oriented toward that. The academic stuff. I just, that's I need that to survive. Otherwise, like, what sense of self will I have from it? Some people may say like that I'm imbalanced. But it's what I had to hold on to.
Okay.
All those years, it's what I had to hold on to. I've spent way too much time in this office over the last 12 years. Way too much time. That's what I have. I mean, the things that are just for me. The thing that I rely upon, so I can stand and look at my daughters and say that I'm somebody. And look at the woman I love and say I'm somebody. To be with my friends, all of that. This is what feeds all of that. I was always a better scholar than I was a husband. I was always a better scholar than I was a father at times. These days, I'm a much better person. I'm a much better companion, a much better, father than I am a scholar. So it's turned inside out for me. But that was a long road.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't have been able to become the father, husband, person that I am without this. This is where I was at my best, and it pulled along those other aspects of life. Otherwise, where was I going to do it? Where was I going to have the experience that I was capable of being something of the highest caliber?
Right.
If I didn't have this.
Wow. Yeah. Speaking of this, Is there an area that you're trying to develop in right now? Or is it sort of going back to what you've just been saying?
We are, me and the young people that I work with, we became this weird thing. We were interdisciplinary by nature because of the problem, not just because we like to read different things, but because of the problem. If you're trying to do something like amend the Colorado Constitution, you can't just, read in one area. You can't just be one thing. If you're trying to push history in a certain way, and if you think that you have an argument that can do that, right, an emergent argument, you have to be able to be good at a lot of things, because that's how socially complex problems are, right? They don't obey discipline at all. You have to become good at what it takes in order to solve the problem. So I became, what I am now is I'm an historian of the experience of learning, who reads broadly in human and civil rights. That's what I am. That's different than saying I'm a professor of sociology or something. Right? That's neat and simple. Mm-hmm. But this other stuff is like, I'm always reading in the law and social science and poetry, anything having to do with language and how to build argument. Yeah, I don't know the limits there. I read whatever appears to be that I think may be helpful in this long-term activity that we're engaged in.
I know you do this, but
what is? And I'm telling you everything, by the way, which is like a weird effect of like the interview situation, but it's tied to the fact that it's you, and you and I have a history, a really good history, which is. But don't get it twisted. I'm surprising myself with what it is that I'm sharing too.
And that's, I think, and that's, I think we talked about this before, and but I remember being in the class with you and really recognizing, like, wow, he really wants us to be thinking about stuff. Like we're going to a different level of how my understanding of what school was. It changed, and I was growing stuff, and I wanted to learn things and I wanted to see things, but I remember being in that class and being like, this is education in a different way than I was used to. And we've been cool since that time, years ago. Yeah. And so that's what I'm hoping, is that these interactions will spur people to start looking at things, to go out and try stuff, to recognize there's different ways, and that not everyone gets somewhere. It's not always a perfect straight road. It's bumpy sometimes, or they fall off the course. But they get back on the best way they can,
Yeah. Man, if I was going to go have lunch, right now, and it was straight across the street, I'd probably find the most bumpy path to get there.
That's awesome.
It could be a beautiful thing, but I think it also troubles me from time to time.
What's the importance of spending time to think and look at stuff?
I want to get it right. I want to get it right. I don't care how long it takes, and I've shown in my career that I'm willing to take that risk for it to take a long time, but I want to get it right. I want to do something that can endure, That's the wonderful, beautiful edge, I think, of once having been very convinced that you are nothing, because I'll avoid that at any cost. This sense that I'm nothing, And that's what makes me do all these, spend, months and months on a paragraph. So, I'm gonna show you something. Watch.
Yeah.
My students gave me this. I'll put it right there so you can see. They gave me this a couple of days ago.
Really?
Yeah, man. It was they gave me this. They handed me this. My doctoral students. They handed me this. Gift bag, and I'm like, it just seemed heavy. So I went home and I checked it out, and I was I opened it. I was I was taken aback. And for me, that's that's making it, man. You know, that matters more to me than if I were to get something from the chancellor.
That's what's up.
It matters way more to me. Way more to me. You know, I mean, they didn't have to do it. Stuff, you know, and they gave me this thing. You know, Rodin's thinker. Like, So the value of it is like, I feel at the very least that I'm doing something worthy of my life. You know, it's a great gift to wake up. And like I said, I want to cherish this life that I have. I do.
Yeah.
I do. And that's one of the things that helps me do that. You know? 'Cause it's a long, involved kind of process. And you do have to give yourself over to it. You can't be a dilettante. You can't dabble in study, you know, if you want to be good at study.
Yeah.
And you know, when I'm doing that, I'm making implicitly I'm making an argument that this activity in which I am engaged is worthy of my life because it takes so many hours, so many years, so much effort. Yeah. You know, it's one of those intrinsically valuable kinds of things. Rare.
Right.
In our world, right? Rare, but yeah, definitely one of them for me.
That's awesome. Let me ask you this. What's a question you would like to ask someone who's alive now that you feel would help you be more effective or be more successful at what you're doing? And who, of course, would you ask it to?
Yeah. I ask it all the time of my male friends. Like and I would ask you too. I haven't asked you this. But what does it take to be a good husband? Because I wasn't before. I was a good provider, and you know, in some things I was a good husband, but at key moments I wasn't. And that's what I would ask. Like, what does it take to be a good husband? Because that's what I want to be.
That's awesome.
That's what I want to be.
Dang, man. Dropping some science, brother.
I'm just showing like how much I don't know, man. But it's better to be honest about that too, you know? Yeah.
We'll dialogue on that one.
Most definitely. Most definitely.
What about same thing, but someone maybe who's not alive right now?
The Apostle Paul. You know? How did he find the wherewithal to persevere? You know? Because he's writing all these epistles. And I don't think we have the historical knowledge to really know, like, how were they received? You know, like crowds of hundreds asking him, you know, to read that epistle again. You know, it doesn't seem like, even though I don't think we have definitive knowledge of all of that. You know, paid the price, imprisonment, being beaten, torment. You know, he must have felt at some point like, what am I doing here, right? Or is it possible that all of this is for naught? That's part of the road of faith too, right? Most definitely. And until you get to the point, you know, and I think maybe few people have it, that they can have an unbreakable bond with God. You know, there's a long road to get to that. At the very least, just from personal experience, I'm like, you know, I wonder how much further I'll have to walk. You know, but yeah, it would be nice to hear, like, you know, how did you persevere and why?
You also already spoke to this here, but I want to sort of transition into life, family balance. Do you feel that what you're doing currently allows for balance physically, mentally, familial, and so forth?
Yes, but that's rather new in life as well. Rather new. I'm able to leave this now. You know, when I leave here, I don't have to pick it up at home. I'm more able to be satisfied in the day if I put in, you know, even if, you know, you just have to be here to do scholarly work, and it's not always going to go well. There'll be some days in which you don't write very much, you write terribly. But you have to be here.
Right.
You can't just give up after the first hour. You have to be here. But now when I leave, I'm able to do that. I go do physical activity, exercise, whatever. When I'm with my daughters, I'm able to be with them, friends and so forth. That I've spent entirely way too much time here, Colin, in my life. Way, way too much time. That this place it got to the point where I would be here and I'd be studying, I'd be in tears because I'd be so sad and lonely. I had to kind of break an addiction in some way to being here again, because it was the thing that I held on to.
Right.
So perhaps I was scared to not be here because, I wouldn't even know what to do if I took a day off. I wouldn't even know what the hell to do. I would be miserable, man. I'd be thinking about being here.
What am I doing?
Yeah, I would be thinking about being here, which is not good. So yeah, these days I am, but that was hard won.
Okay.
That was hard won.
What's a serious challenge that you faced? Maybe business, professional, personal, whatever, or are facing, and how did you conquer it or recover from it, or how are you going through it?
Mm-hmm. It's like they're twin kinds of things, One is, this is a throughout life, making mistakes and then trying to make amends for them.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be very sincere and diligent in that, and then you also have to give up at some point in the sense that you can only make it so much better because there's no way to, you can't rescind the initial act, no matter how much you would like.
Right.
That pain remains, not in you, in other people. Mm-hmm. And you're going to reach a limit into how much amends you can make. You have to accept that. That's very difficult for me. That was very difficult for me to accept. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, opening up something new, and allowing yourself, recognizing that you perhaps do not merit this chance, but here you have one. Right? That's God's grace, right? You don't merit it, but here it is.
Yeah.
What will I do with it? That's difficult on its own terms as well. Not thinking that you are, love worthy or worthy of happiness. That'll hold you up too.
Yeah.
No matter how wonderful the person is, no matter how glorious the opportunity seems. You have to allow yourself to walk through.
Push through it, yeah. For people who are looking to grow, to develop, to achieve in what it is they're doing, is there a book or a movie, a documentary, something you might recommend for them to look at, to watch, to read?
Those seem to me to be personal matters of faith, right? They have a great deal to do with taste and how you accept faith. And I mean, faith can be religious or secular. Because if you are trying to be something different, better, you're still in the realm of the shall. You shall be better. That's future oriented, right? And there's no, that's why they call it hope, because you don't hope in something that's already here.
Right.
You hope in what's not seen, right? And that's difficult. So I think as many examples as a person can find in art, in one's friends, in people that you surround yourself with, in the things that you read, and in your behaviors, that you're trying to foster that and you're trying to bring it about. It requires attention on all fronts, I think. It's very difficult to be a different kind of person. Very difficult. So yeah, surround yourself with all of that, and continue when you fail.
Continue when you fail.
Yeah, continue when you fail. And if you're gonna read stuff, if you're gonna watch movies about these, you can find it in many different places, in art, in music, wherever. I'd be suspicious of people who told that narrative without error, and who didn't talk about the multiple times that they had to try. I'd be suspicious of it if it was just like that. At least the people I run with, man, they had to make the decision over and over and over and over again. Yeah.
That's awesome. What about for you though? What's your favorite movie or book? Or both?
Sure. For book, I'd take Toni Morrison's Beloved, which I think is the greatest American novel ever written. In terms of movie, I have a soft spot in my heart for the things that I used to watch with my father. Ten Commandments. On every Easter, cowboy movies, which are like morality tales, right? That kind of stuff. All those old movies. Things like the classic kind of Hollywood stuff. Black and white sometimes. All of that. I think I have a soft spot in my heart for that because they were always accompanied by my father's moral teachings, and he had he occupied this this kind of tormented existence, because we'd watch that, and then in the commercials, you didn't want to miss the commercials because he would explain to you what was happening, and he did it so wonderfully. And at the same time, he was many times he was not able to live up to that, which is maybe I think I have a penchant or a soft spot in my heart for those kinds of philosophers, like Seneca. Seneca was could not live up to anything that he wrote, really, in some ways. He was an advisor to Nero. He fell prey to everything that we're immune to. Money, sex, food. He had it in abundance. And he fell often. So that's why I think there's okay, this person knows what he's talking about, because he couldn't live up to it in the same way I couldn't, in the same way I can't.
Right.
But I'm tireless, bro. I am tireless. I'll give myself that. I haven't given up on myself.
Awesome. Because you shouldn't. You should not.
I figure if I walk towards the night, if I walk nightward, I can make myself into the person that I believe I can be. I have faith in that. There's nothing more than faith.
Yeah.
Because I didn't know I was, sort of capable of the love that I'm able presently to express. That surprised me. It was a great surprise. I didn't know I could do that. I had no idea. I had to have faith in it, man. It was tough too.
Yeah.
Be vulnerable and open all the time, man. It's like, man, I didn't want to do that, man. Somehow I kept convincing myself that this was the way to go. Straight into the fear. Straight into the night. Instead of turning 180 and going the other way, which I had done for most of my life. It kept me safe, but it was a illusory safety. Because I just went. I also encountered a lot of trouble along the way, and I was ill prepared because I didn't know how to love. I was ill prepared to meet it. You got the best of me. I got the best of myself.
Yeah. Brother, thank you.
Man, where did I send the copay, man?
Oh, man.
My brother, man. Thank you, man.
Thank you. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I'm sure it was a blessing for you. I hope you could see and pick out the heart of what he was saying and let that be an inspiration for you, encouraging you and moving forward and growing, recognizing that we are all learning and we could all do different things. If you haven't already, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. I do so much appreciate all of you who are subscribing and viewing these videos. Send me your comments, send me your questions, send me what you have. And as long as it's in love, I am definitely going to be responding back to you. So thank you so much for tuning in. Until next time, don't forget to think about what's your kingdom style.